connective connects to propositions to form new propositions. A truth-functional connective is one that forms a new proposition whose truth value is totally dependent on, or is a function of, the truth values of its component propositions, of those propositions that make it up. Now, my example for our first one, the negation, is going to be from the movie Borat, which, spoiler alert, wildly inappropriate. Okay, get your parents' permission before you watch this one. But there is a very funny scene in there, and it all revolves around this proposition, this tie is black. Now, this tie is black is a proposition because it's a claim about reality. It claims that reality is such that this thing right here, this tie thing, is black. The problem is, though, this tie is not black. Notice what we just did, though. We started with a proposition, this tie is black. I added a word, and all of a sudden we had a totally new proposition. Guys, that's a connective. This is our first kind of connective. We'll call it a negation. Now, this can be a confusing one because often when my students first hear that word connective, they think that it means it connects more than one proposition together, and actually most of them do. This one is the only one-place connective, the only one that just attaches to one proposition. But maybe you could think about that word connective meaning something more like it connects to propositions and makes new propositions from them. How many propositions does it connect to? Well, possibly one, possibly multiple. Think about this new proposition we just made. What makes it true? Well, what makes it true is the fact that its component proposition, this tie is black, is a false proposition. So notice, we add this connective, we get a new proposition. Its truth value is totally dependent upon its component proposition. This is a truth functional connective as well. This connective we'll call a negation. A negation, as we said, is a one-place connective. It only attaches to one proposition. Some other words that mean the same thing, it's a unary connective or it's a monadic connective. And it's not that these words are super important, but you might see them in other logic books, or possibly if you're taking a different course, you're going to see those terms, so may as well learn them now. The resulting negation is true if and only if the negand is false. And it's false if and only if the negand is true. We'll use that word negand to refer to that component proposition, that only one component proposition. We're going to use this word negation to actually do double duty here. It's going to refer to the connective that we used to attach to this proposition. It's also going to be used to refer to the new proposition that's a result of attaching the negation connective to the negand. Now, there's a reason that we're calling this connective a negation and not just saying it's the word not. There are actually multiple ways of expressing this same kind of negation, and not all of them use the word not. However, not is the most obvious and the most concise of them, so it's typically the easiest one to think of. But here are some other examples that we could say. We could say this tie is not black. We could say this tie is black. Not. We could say there's no way this tie is black. Or we could even say this tie is black. In the book, the example is there's an elephant in the room. Here's some possible ways that we can make a negation from that. It's not the case that there's an elephant in the room, there is no elephant in the room, or there is not an elephant in the room. In fact, in some languages, the word not doesn't even exist, and yet you still have negations. So for example, in Spanish, there is no hay un elefante en el cuarto. That word no is the same as our word no, but they use it in place of the word not. And it's to do the same thing that we're talking about with this connective. It attaches to the negand and it negates it. It makes it the case that our new proposition is true if and only if that component proposition is false. Hay un elefante en el cuarto. So the idea of a connective is a lot more abstract than the idea of the words that really express the connective. The important thing to remember is that that connective negation attaches to a negand and makes it a new proposition that is true if and only if the negand is false, and it's false if and only if the negand is true. But now imagine the following scenario. Let's say you're talking to Borat, lucky you. Borat says, this tie is not black. And you look at that tie and you realize, but wait, this is a black tie. And you're like, yes, it is. And he says, no, this tie is not black. And you look at it even closer and you're like, what's this guy talking about? Finally, you get frustrated at the shenanigans, right? You say, this tie is not black. Now notice what we did here. We actually did the same thing that Borat did in the first place. He took the proposition, this tie is black. He added a negation, a connective, and it made a new proposition, this tie is not black. This new proposition is true if and only if its component proposition is false, right? It's true if and only if this tie is black is false, and it's false if and only if that component proposition is true. Well, we took his new proposition and we made an even newer one. We added another word, not, and now we have a new proposition, this tie is not black. And again, this newer proposition is true if and only if Borat's proposition is false, and it's false if and only if Borat's proposition is true. So what we really did is we took Borat's negation and we negated that thing. We embedded a negation inside of a negation. This is called a double negation. And notice its truth value is equivalent to that of the original negand. This tie is black and this tie is not black. Both have the same truth values. If the first one is true, the second one's going to be true. And if the first one is false, the second one's going to be false. And this makes sense because they're basically making the same claim about reality, which is that this tie is black. Now, a double negation is not the same as a double negative. In English, we don't allow double negatives grammatically speaking. We don't say, I didn't do nothing. What's interesting is in other languages, they do not only allow double negatives, but they require it. So in Spanish, no hice nada is I didn't do nothing is actually the right way to say it. The thing is, these are just different rules of grammar, and they don't actually affect the meaning that's being expressed. They don't affect the proposition. In the Spanish sentence, no hice nada, you're just making that word no match that word nada. In English, the sentence is, I didn't do anything. The word didn't is a negative, and we kind of think that having another negative at the end would be a little repetitive, so we don't use that. But notice, they're just rules of syntax, just rules of how to make a sentence, but they're not rules about meaning. Both sentences actually mean the exact same thing, whereas a double negation doesn't mean the same as a single negation. Saying the tie is not black is not the same as saying the tie is not black. In fact, it's the exact opposite. So, quick review, a negation is a connective that you can add to a proposition, we call the negand, to make a new proposition that we confusingly call a negation as well. And that new negation is true if and only if the negand is false, and it's false if and only if the negand is true. And you can embed one negation inside of another one. In fact, you can embed as many negations as you want. They just start to become repetitive and totally useless after a while. Now let's do a little practice to make sure that we get what a negation is. For next time, please do section 1.6.1.1 exercises.